Well, welcome back to the Nourish podcast. We are in the middle of a series called Radical Devotion, which is in keeping with our theme for the year at Discovery Church. And we've been talking about some stories in Scripture and examples of what it looks like to live a life radically devoted to Jesus in a culture that is set up to draw our attention and our affection away from the things of Jesus so easily. And so it's a bit of a countercultural conversation, but today's episode we're focusing on a story in Scripture from Luke chapter 2, and it's actually the story of the boy Jesus at the temple. And on the podcast today, over the course of this series, I've had some of the incredible women that are part of the staff team here at Discovery joining me. So today I'm welcoming back Beck Lambert, who's our executive pastor here at Discovery. So
hello.
Great to have you here with us, Beck. Beck and I get to work quite closely together and do lots of life together. And we've also got the beautiful Kathy Sarek back with us again, who's a big part of our community team and always brings such a prophetic insight to our conversation. So I know that you'll be blessed by what these ladies have to contribute to the conversation today. So what I'm going to do, we're going to get started. I'm going to read the scripture and then just give a little bit of context, and then we'll open up the discussion. So great to have you joining us, everyone. So here is the story today, Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 52. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they travelled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favour with God and man. It's such a cool story, and I feel like anyone who has ever looked after a child, whether you're a parent or you've babysat a niece or nephew and they've gone out of your sight for a moment, will resonate with Mary's response here. You know, I've been searching for you everywhere, and to find that, you know, he was safe the whole time. You know, I've had so many experiences like that where my kids have gone, you know, hidden under a rack at the shops, or you know, we've lost them at the beach in a crowd of people, and the sheer terror that comes upon you when you realise they're not with you.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's equal parts terrifying and humorous, this story, I feel.
Humorous after the fact.
Humorous after the fact, not at the time when you think, oh my gosh, we've been walking a whole day and we've only just realised, and now we've got to walk a whole day back.
And what could have happened?
And then another 3 days. So it's 5 days that this 12-year-old has been without his parents. So let's just take a minute to just empathise with Mary and Joseph about this situation.
Wow.
But one of the cool things about this story is it's one of the only stories we have in Scripture about Jesus as a child. We have Jesus' birth, and then, you know, Jesus launches on the scene in his public ministry as a 30-year-old.
So true.
And this is one of the only stories. So I don't really know why that is. It would be good to do a little bit of research into why. And it might just be because he was busy growing in wisdom and stature and just being a child, and the Lord was preparing him in the background for his ministry. But it is cool that we have this one story. And so it's obviously in here for a reason. And so the question is, what is there for us to learn and to glean out of this story about Jesus' example, even as a 12-year-old, around radical devotion. And you know, this famous line, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" Which is kind of the standout line from this passage. So, observations as you've read the scripture and meditated on it in preparation for our conversation today. What jumped out at you? What are the gleaming details? What did you notice?
Well, the first one for me, it isn't really on that spiritual level, but it is that kind of that humorous and terrifying aspect of the story. And I was reading a commentary to go along with it, and it was the first time I'd sort of read it in this way, because there is a part of you that's like, come on, really? Like, that's a long time to have missed your child.
Yeah.
And so reading a commentary about it, they were saying it was customary at the time that people would travel in these like caravans of people, and Jesus being 12.
And not a caravan like a JK.
No, that's right. Like old school caravans.
A line of
people
and camels and baggage
that's
and
it.
groups and
That's
groups
it.
upon groups. Yes, not just...
And so the Jesus being 12 and in those times being nearly considered an adult, which is kind of crazy to us in this day and age, but that the women tend to travel at the front and the men tend to travel at the back for protection. And so Jesus being the age he was could have conceivably been split up into either the women and children.
This is a classic. I thought you were with mum, but mum thinks you're with dad.
Exactly.
And then no one's got you,
Exactly.
isn't it?
And speaking from experience.
Exactly. So
I did this on the weekend. I was supposed to bring Lucy home from church, and I thought Matt had her, and he thought I had her, and she was still here by herself. So there you go, guys. We all have these moments of
You're not alone,
of
Jones.
confusion. I had to quickly turn around and come back.
I have to confess to that as well. I've done that to Elijah, so I am also guilty.
I'm sure he was with you. Yeah.
So you can relate very
Can
personally.
relate,
But yeah, just the fact that that he could have been with the women and children, but he could have been with the men because of his age, and that's kind of why they assumed that they were with each other. And I was like, that makes so much more sense than just like going missing for so many hours.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that really that stood out on a really practical level. And just that beautiful verse 52. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favour with God and man, and that reminded me of that the idea of God as fully human, fully God, inseparable. He was fully God, but he still had to grow in wisdom and stature and in favour with people, and just that reminder, I guess, again that brings me back that Jesus really can identify with the human condition, can identify with us, and what he went through as an adolescent growing up as well. So
So
That's great. How about for you, Kathy?
Yeah, so I love the fact that Jesus stayed behind. Like, there would have been that movement and momentum of everyone leaving, and the fact that he chose to stay behind. Like, so even as a 12-year-old, he's such, like, just this, I think, conviction of this is where I'm supposed to be, like, rather than be with his parents. Like, as a 12-year-old, normally that would be where most children or most, adolescents would think, I need to be with my parents. But his choice to stay behind, I think, speaks volumes. Like, and then his challenge back to his parents, like, why were you worried? Like, didn't you know this is where I was meant to be? Like...
Oh, that's your phone, Kathy. You can go and turn it off. Just excuse us for a moment while we have a technical issue. While Kathy's doing that, I'm really struck by that statement that he makes. Didn't you know I need to be in my Father's house? Another translation says, didn't you know I need to be about my Father's business?
Yeah, great.
And I find that like, boom.
yes.
Every time I read it, I feel like it just is like,
Yeah.
gets me right there, because I think it makes me ask the question, I'm always busy doing a lot of things, but am I busy with the Father's business, the things that he's invited me to put my hands to, or am I busy with my own business and things I think are good and right? They might be good and great and right and awesome, but they might not be the Father's business and the things that he's wanting me to give my attention to.
Totally.
So it always challenges me around my own propensity to put my agenda first or my plans first or getting all my ducks in a row, and then being like, oh, hang on a minute, is this the Father's business or is this my business? But go on, Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, so exactly that. I think in that momentum of everyone leaving, the caravan of people, like, I almost imagine just the road of, it's almost like a protest, we just see hundreds of thousands of people walking like a main area. So everyone's leaving, and then Jesus is choosing to stay behind, found in the temple courts, sitting amongst the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. So even at that young age, it's almost like he had such a strong connection to his purpose, like as in, this is what I want to learn, this is where I need to be. And I just had that he obviously had wisdom beyond his years because people were amazed at his understanding and his answers. It just stood out to me, just the choice for him to stay behind. Like that was profound for me, because I was seeing, most other 12-year-olds just would go with the flow, So he just had, I think, just a strong conviction of, this is where I'm meant to be, this is my call,
Yeah, I think that stood out to me too. He seems to have this intuitive or this deep sense of clarity around call, didn't you know?
Yeah.
And even to be, and then his the curiosity that's in him, the posture of a learner, asking questions, sitting in the temple, asking, preparation. And then, this clarity around call and purpose that his parents didn't even understand. And I felt really prompted as we were preparing for this, just to speak to the people today who perhaps you feel so called and convicted around what the Lord has invited you to. And maybe there are some people in your world that don't quite understand it, and they might even be the people that are closest to you. Not to be discouraged, because, we see in this, even Jesus' parents, that it says they, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? But they did not understand what he was saying to them. And sometimes when we have a conviction in our heart, and it might be something radical that you feel like the Lord's asked you to do, following Jesus is a radical adventure, and sometimes taking up your cross and following Jesus means crazy things that don't make sense to people.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're big fans of seeking wise counsel and, having great systems and processes in place in your life for discernment and being able to really discern the will of God. But sometimes the Lord will invite you to something that others won't understand, and it can be really discouraging. And so I just really feel there's an encouragement in this story not to give up on something or pull back from something just because others around you might not get it,
that's good.
or might not share the same conviction, but to wrestle with, how do I get, and I think I'd love to ask you guys to speak to this, so I want to do it before we run out of time. How in your journey so far, following the Lord, what have been the things that have helped you get clear on your call and purpose? Because it seems to me in this story that this radical devotion is deeply rooted in a sense of identity and clarity of call. And so I know for a lot of years I really struggled around, what am I called to? Like, that was a really abstract idea. How am I supposed to narrow that down to like one thing? Or how am I just meant to know what the Lord's called me to do with my whole life? And as I've gotten older, I've realised that's been a journey that's had to be walked out, and often we have one call but many assignments, and so there's expressions of that call. So for people who are listening today going, how do I get some clarity on my call this year? What's helped you?
Do you want me to
You can go if you like.
Sure. Even as you were speaking, Joes, I was saying, I think when we speak of like, what is my call, I think people are sometimes asking the question, what is the position I should be, how should I position myself with the Lord? What's the title I need to have to feel like I'm called by God? Whereas I would say, if we allow ourselves to know that being called by God literally just means placing him at the foremost of our activity, at the foremost of our thoughts, like, because I feel like our preparation is, like our journey is a part of the whole preparation in our sense of call.
Yeah.
So it's that old theory of like, that let life be the journey, not a destination. So you'd hear so many people say, God never wastes anything. And if I look back on all of my experience to where I am now, every part of it was a time where I felt called, but or the accumulation of the skills and experience makes sense for now as well. So I would hate for anyone to discount where they are in the current moment, thinking I don't feel called, because there's something really sweet and beautiful about, it's kind of like Jesus being prepared in wisdom and stature. There's something beautiful about being prepared in wisdom and stature, And I think we as a Western culture don't value that as much as some of the Eastern cultures might. And so if we allow ourselves to see our journey with God where we're being prepared in wisdom and stature, for the sake of even like thinking of you and Matt, you know, like where you guys have been to then now end up in your position, it's not nice to be under people who haven't been prepared in wisdom and stature, you know, but it's beautiful to be under people who have. And I feel when we allow ourselves to be in that preparation phase and that whole experience is a sense of calling, as opposed to it's not a title, it's not a position, it's not a destination, but everything is a part of the preparation of God, so that we can increase in our responsibility, we can increase in our, you know, all of that. So that's how I interpret a sense of call. It's not a position, it's not a title, it's a journey. And in everything I have done previously, you know, I remember saying to the Lord, Lord, deconstruct me and reconstruct me, because I knew that my foundation was built on thinking I had to prove myself in career. And so I went back to working in factories, which I'd never done, but it was super intentional to let myself be in a space that I would not have chosen probably personally, professionally, but it was to let the Lord build my internal world. But even in that space, I knew it was a sense of call, you know, and I've let everything that I've done since I've been aware of this feel like it was a sense of call.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's good.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's always so helpful to remember that no season is wasted if you allow it to do its work, rather than just kind of rage against it, or kind of just, you know, put the head in the sand and kind of wait it out. So yeah, don't waste the season you're in, even if it's not the place that you thought you would be. Probably I would say, as I look back on my journey, it's noticing where I end up again and again and again.
Great.
If I'm left to my own devices, what are the things I'm naturally drawn to? Where are the spaces that I find myself in? What are the ways that people would consistently describe me? And because people call out your gifts sometimes without you even realising that that's happening. And so what are the words that people have spoken over you and said about you?
Good point.
I would also say kind of holding hands with that is, you know, where are the moments that you feel truly alive and
Great.
I'm in my lane, and I feel like I'm in the slipstream of God's will for my life. And so if you can find that place, or even moments of or glimpses of what that would be, I think that gives you little puzzle pieces to put together. You might not put those puzzle pieces together for 20 years and go through different seasons of your life, but as you sort of get to look back, you know, get to be a little bit further down the journey as I am, you get to look back over and see how those pieces come together, and I think that really tells you a lot about kind of what God's will specific to you is.
That's great. Some really practical things there. You know, I've you know, a great place to start. Even, you know, if this is something that you're trying to get some clarity on, just grab a piece of paper, and as Beck said, make a list of the things you're naturally good at. If you're not sure what you're good at, ask the people closest to you what they'll tell you. They will be an honest reflection to you. You're great at that. You're great at that. I really see you shine when you're doing that particular thing. So, you know, just capturing those natural gifts and talents, thinking about what are the things that you constantly get invited to do, or rooms you get invited to be in, or things you end up, roles, positions, things you just happen to always end up being the one who does X. And then, you know, thinking about what are the words that people have spoken over you, or that, you know, maybe you've had some prophetic words in your life, in your journey that you can capture. What are your spiritual gifts? If you're not sure what they are, there are lots of great resources out there to do your spiritual gifts. You know, we have a lot of things here at church that are helpful for that too. Things like Story Day that just help you kind of reflect on lots of those threads. And as you start to pull them, some clarity starts to come about maybe what the Lord might be doing
that's
in
good.
you and with you. And also just, thinking about it looks different in every season, right? Some seasons you feel like you've got a lot of disposable time and capacity to do things, and other seasons you might be up to your eyeballs in nappies and feeding babies and you think, how can I live out any kind of call when all I'm doing is, in this season, but not wishing the season away, but being able to recognise actually God has a plan and a purpose for you in every season of life. And your call gets expressed differently in all those different seasons. All right, so some invitations as we start to get to the end of this conversation. One of the things I really felt the Lord prompt me about, again, another theme for this year is I really feel like it is going to be a refining year for many. This invitation to radical devotion, I feel like the Lord really drawing us and encouraging us again and again just to push back, turn away from the idols of our age, that we don't think idolatry is a problem for us because we don't have shiny calves in our lounge rooms, but it is a problem for us, and in some ways more of a problem because it's very sneaky and often looks invisible, but it's there.
Completely.
And it can look like a whole lot of different things. It can look like material possessions, it can look like power, it can look like money, it can look like relationships, it can look like image, ego,
Endless.
Yeah. Anything that has more of your attention and your affection than the Lord does is an idol in your life. And the instruction in Scripture is to turn away from that and pull it out and return to the Lord. And I think God is doing something significant across His church in Australia in drawing us back to the foot of the cross and face down in worship and hungry for more of Him and persistent in prayer. And, Jesus models that to us so beautifully here. And, I feel incredibly challenged by this scripture and, thinking about what does it look like to continually come back to that, Lord, am I being about your business today? Have I got my heart set on building your house today? And, am I trusting that if I focus on your business and your house and your agenda and your kingdom plan, that you'll take care of mine, rather than I'm kind of focusing on what you're doing, Lord, and I'm also trying to make sure all my stuff's okay over here. Beck and I have talked a lot about this, the plan B, our propensity to I trust you, Lord, and I'm just going to have this plan B, trust that you're going to come through for me, but just in case you don't, I'm just going to set a few things up over here. And for me, that's been a constant struggle in my own life. Of just feeling the Lord draw me and go, hang on, you've still got a hand on this plan B. I'm asking you to give that up and to truly trust me. Closing thoughts on just this story, this conversation.
I mean, my little reflection was just an invitation to not be distracted, because I do feel like when you say about the idols, I think there's so many distractions in this day. And if I think back historically, the church used to be the centre of a community where people would go to the church on a Sunday, they'd receive the teaching, they'd gather as community. There might be a sport on the Saturday but wouldn't have been on a Sunday historically. But now it's like there's so much all the time competing for our attention. How do we make Jesus front and centre and everything else come behind that? So I've just for me it's this constant check to not be lured by the worldly measures of success and to not be lured by engaging. Facebook and social media is another classic. So much time can get given in that space, and I know already I don't read my Bible enough. So I've almost said to myself, if I can't read my Bible enough, then I really have to watch what else I give my time to, because the bottom line for me will be I just don't have enough time. And it's we all have the same amount of time, but how I'm going to choose to, spend my time.
It's pretty confronting when your phone gives you that. Have you ever looked at the screen?
Oh, the amount of screen time
data, and it says to you, this week you've spent this many hours on the screen. And I often think, how many hours have I spent just, with the Lord, whatever that might look like. And not in a Pharisaical way of, okay, we have to do to be a good Christian. I need to be reading my Bible 1 hour every day. Like, that's going to look different for everybody. But I know when I see the screen time and I measure that up against the time I've spent just with the Lord, it's often out of balance, not in the way I'd like it to be.
And even just to
It's
sit
a challenge.
quietly, like, like even if it's not about reading the Bible, like, I love the quiet times with the Lord, but like to get my brain to disengage from all the distractions, like that's next level as well, so I mean,
good. I love it. Final thought, Beck?
I love verse 51 there, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart, and just a reminder to ask the question, what am I treasuring? It's all the things that you've spoken about, the distractions and the things that we spend our time on, but a very wise woman once said to me, sort of like, it's really telling what you do with your free time. Like, where does your heart and your affection and your attention go to when you've got free time? And that's just a huge challenge. And just to be like Mary, to store these things up, to treasure them.
Can I add one last final thing?
can.
On your plan B thing, it really struck a chord, because I feel like living by faith has to be a choice in our affluence, right? So preparing ourselves to not have a plan B and to be fully devoted to trust in him as the ultimate. Like, we're experiencing it in the house at DCC, where we'll often say, oh, should we keep back, like a little bit of this or a little bit of that? And the next day the provision just flows incredibly in that exact area. And so I feel like God's really testing us in that space too, to not have a plan B. Like, don't have a plan B of a little stash of onions, and don't have a plan B of a little, sauce. And like, it literally is, but I find that energizing. And so
And it's different to, don't, like, obviously what we're not saying is don't lack wisdom in how you steward your affairs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I'm not saying
Like,
don't
ditch
be
everything and have nothing.
irresponsible.
Yeah.
But I think the wisdom is actually in the deep trust in the Lord.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the deep trust is in all things. It's not just like it's not just finances.
It's not.
It's in fact it starts in other
whole
things.
of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, girls. It's been a really rich conversation today. I hope that's encouraged you, those of you who are listening or watching online. We've loved having you join us for this episode. We've got one episode to come in this first series of the year that we're doing as part of our Nourish podcast. So our final episode is going to be on contagious community and looking at what a devoted community looks like. And we're going to be opening the scriptures and looking at Acts 2 on our next episode. So we'd love you to join us for that. But thanks for being with us today, and we will catch up with you very soon.